Hello and welcome back to a new episode of the CTO Show with Mehmet. Today, I'm very pleased. Joining me from the US, Jason Lee. He's the CTO of Laurel. We're going to talk about Laurel in details. Jason is building something really interesting, which is, time management. And, we're going to talk about also what's the problems behind this and how AI is able to solve these problems. But before this, as my audience know, I like to keep it to my guests to introduce themselves. So, Jason, again, thank you for joining me here today. Tell us a bit more about you, your background, your journey. You have a very great background, but I will leave to you to tell us a bit more about this, and then we can dive directly into our discussion today. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on. I'm excited to be here. Background for me, I've been working in tech, especially tech startup for quite a while. I spent a good chunk of the time in enterprise software. So I was at a CRM startup for a bit and was at Salesforce. Then I was at a company called Ironclad, which is contracting software. And now, as you mentioned, I'm at Laurel. So really I've kind of seen and spent a lot of time in that journey from early stage B2B software to larger corporations of that size, doing that kind of work. And obviously right now going through that transition into, very AI focused, AI native, and in this legal tech space that is so hot in that intersection right now as well. I'm based out in the Bay Area and yeah.
Great. Thank you again, Jason, for being here with me today. Now, Laurel started it originally, as per my researches, like as automated timekeeping. But now the messaging kind of evolved, and this is very normal into time intelligence. Like, walk us through this. What does it mean from product perspective?
Yeah. So timekeeping, like that product, that focus, you can think of it as there's a bunch of people in the world who bill for time, right? You think about lawyers, you think about accountants, they bill per the hour, right? And if you're not in that area, you may not realize how antiquated that is. Like people effectively will write down notepads or write somewhere like I spent 6 minutes doing this thing, or I spent 12 minutes doing this thing. And then they go back and write like they spent hours in a day or hours at the end of the week filling out those bills, right? And so like that's why automated timekeeping is so impactful. However, on technology side, if you think about how you solve that problem, which is what Laurel has done, is like, hey, we actually kind of track what you're doing and give visibility and surface that activity back up to you so you can build those timesheets. That kind of technology is relevant for everyone, right? Like I would venture a guess the vast majority of people who listen to this and knowledge workers, et cetera, you spend a lot of time working on the computer, but you don't actually know where you spend your time, right? And you would love to, right? And so effectively our technology allows you to know where you spend your time so that you can, in our initial case is to bill for time, but also just get that visibility to do whatever else makes sense. Invest strategically here because you're spending more time there than you want or whatever else. So, yeah.
Right. Now, most of people, when they think about time tracking, they think about it as an administrative problem, right?
Yep.
So, right, purely. You frame that into an operational intelligence problem, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So, what do you think the market understand too late about time data? Like, are they still missing that? I would say.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's one of those things that I think if you talk to people is actually very obvious, but it's like so far from what actually people are used to that people don't think about it, right? Like if you go tell people you should know where you spend your time, everyone would be like, obviously, I should know where I spend my time. Like that's not a huge insight. However, it is in the sense that no one is like, oh, hey, how am I going to get a better insight of what we're doing, right? Like, and it's funny because like there's all kinds of work. If you think about software engineering, like a lot of what we talk about, people do agile, they do points, they track how much a team can do, et cetera. So you try to get some sense of like where you spend your time in terms of work, but you miss so many different things. And so it's really almost like people are so default, like used to not having a solution to that problem, even though everyone agrees that that's something they would want. It's really being across that barrier of like, you know what? Actually, we really could just see that, right? And if you could do all these things, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a funny
Now,
thing.
Jason, something interesting because when we look today at the AI landscape, I mean, all the companies, the first thing they tell you like we're trying to replace the work, right?
Yeah.
Now, for Laurel, like seems like it's more focusing on understanding the work itself, and
Mm-hmm.
you know, in my opinion, this is a huge differentiation because like I work a little bit in cyber security. I work in network visibility back in the days, and we used to say like we cannot actually protect what we don't see, right?
Yep.
Now, to
Exactly.
me, like, do you think like this distinction is like applicable for you at Laurel, where if I come today as a consultant and an AI, quote
Yeah.
unquote, of course,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
consultant, so the first thing I'm gonna start to tell the client, maybe after a while, oh, like let's put this AI tool here, let's put generative AI there, and so on. So do you see what you're doing, trying to understand actually where is the time spent as a differentiation, as a moat actually versus what the other AI startups are trying to do?
100%. And I think your analogy to the what you measure and what you go against is perfectly apt. Is like that, like, yeah, I honestly, I'm a human. I'd rather not replace human work. I'd rather be like, hey, where can we find the most leverage for the work that we do? And I feel comfortable saying, I know I'm going to guess most people do, is like, hey, there's definitely leverage to be had. Like, where do we spend our time? Where could be better spent and be more effective? And like, so a couple examples is like in our space, a lot of our folks we sell to is legal and accounting because they do bill for time, and that's where we started. And there's examples there where, for example, senior partners at those firms, a lot of their job is getting new clients, right? And so if they spend a lot of their time on administrative work, that's wasted time, right? And so if we can find, obviously, where they're spending time doing time entry, but even beyond that, where they're like doing some internal thing that isn't adding leverage for their business, hey, they should find tooling or they should hire somebody to go do that so they can do the biggest additive thing for the business. And right now they don't have visibility to that, and we can help them do that. But that's true for many, many things. And like a good example, we're talking about other AI companies as well, is actually AI spend itself, right? Like everyone is buying some AI tool to do X, Y, Z. And honestly, a lot of the times people don't have really good insight if it's actually adding the leverage that they hope, right? Like they're perfectly willing to make the spend, but they don't have good measurements of like, did it actually save them time? Did it actually get the results they want? And I think that's one of the things we can also help with is like, okay, hey, if you got this AI tool because you think it's going to reduce time here, we can help see that for you, right? We can be like, okay, hey, you're not actually spending as much time there. Great. Or it hasn't made a difference. Or it shifted over here. You have a new bottleneck. It's over here. You got to go solve that now.
Right. Now, you mentioned actually, it's good you mentioned the kind of the verticals you try to position your product to legal and accounting firms. Now we know there's a high sensitivity on compliance.
Yep.
There's a lot of sensitive data over there. So, and here I'm asking you as a CTO, of course, like how is the experience of building AI systems that professionals like working in these firms, legal, accounting, finance, um, like how to convey the message for them that, you know, gentlemen, you can rely on this system. It can be trusted because at the end of the day, you're touching on maybe some, I would say, economically sensitive workflows for them. So I'm curious to know like how do you position that when you talk to these firms?
You mean like building trust, especially in the AI based features? Or just,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, because there's a lot of talk about how we can trust AI,
Yep.
whether like from both security perspective, compliance, and so on.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I think you're touching on like both security and compliance, but there's also like the model of accuracy itself, right?
Right.
And
Yes, exactly.
it is.
Reliability.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And like even prior to this, Laura, I was at a company, Ironclad. We did contracting, right? And we would ingest contracts and try to understand them as well. It's the same questions came up. And I think on the security compliance thing, I think a lot of that is honestly doing the same kind of work that you've done in your past career and just we've done in the past of like, okay, hey, let's create the great guardrails, the right environments, et cetera, to minimize risk and mitigate risk and get to the risk profile they're comfortable with. And that's everything from like data residency questions, encryption questions, et cetera, to kind of contain that to some degree. Obviously, AI adds an interesting other bit. And as an aside, as you go into, as you mentioned, these kind of verticals and these spaces that are more sensitive, you get more painful experiences, right? You have to do, as a vendor, as us, you have to do more work, right? Of like, okay, hey, we're gonna have to be a little more complex in our infrastructure to handle this, or we have to run another region to do that. Quick aside, funny thing from my perspective as CTO is like, in this new world of AI, like there's a lot of questions on what your mode is and what are you, how you can differentiate. I actually think a
Mhm.
lot of this kind of painful work is great, actually, right? This painful work for this kind of stuff actually is the at least easy to copy. You can actually copy a UI to go do something, but like a lot of this stuff just takes time. You got to do the right thing and that there's effort to be had to go solve that. So I think there's that. And then on the performance bit, like, does it do what you expect it to do for AI? That one's an interesting one because I think to me, it's a mix of a few things. Like, one, it's actually a good thing to remind everyone who's worked in this is like humans are fallible, right? It's not like the humans who are doing this work before were perfect, right? And so, like, obviously, you want, like, the goal is not to be imperfect as software, right? But like you're going there. So then it's like, okay, hey, if that's the case, like, what do we want to do to make it successful? And then a lot of it, and I've really enjoyed talking to our design leader here too about this, is like, I actually think a lot with like AI features, it's so much like in partnership with design. It's not just like, does the model do this thing? Because it's not going to be 100% of the time. Right? That just like that pretty much is impossible, right? And so I think it's so much about how do you combine the technology, do the thing you work on, and the experience you give, so that gives confidence, right? Like if for example, you have an experience that's presented to you as hey, we have 100% confidence, and then when you're wrong, like that's very different than you're presenting something like, hey, we're pretty sure this is right. This should save you time. You should double check it and then confirm. And that's a completely different experience, right? And I think to this point of like, hey, when people are super sensitive about something, do that, and you might do it differently. And like, yeah. So I think it's so much like, how do you tailor the experience to the models you have, the performance they have, so that the user like builds trust, right? In doing that. And that's the same thing, honestly, you do with people too, right? Like the same things apply.
Right. Now, in terms of, like any other AI, solution that you need to deploy, I've heard a lot and I've seen also personally is that, these systems can work as good as, the systems around them are good, right?
Yeah.
So are companies getting better in, fixing their stuff before actually deploying these AI systems internally? Or are we still, struggling, in doing some pre-work before making, the actual solution um, act as we are expecting it to act?
my quick answer, as you were saying, that was like, no, we're not getting. And I said that because I think so. I think yes. Yeah, I think people are getting better. They're getting more sophisticated and all of that jazz. But I do think there's a couple of things. I think people are working in tech. We live in a bubble. We live in a bubble of, obviously AI has escaped the bubble and everyone's talking about AI. But I think people's where they are in that curve, the vast majority of people, even in people who are companies that are buying AI tooling, they're not at the forefront of the tooling, right? And so you see that, right? Effectively, you see those same lessons being learned again and again, and that's the
Right.
thing. And even the slower adopters often have, naturally have more things that are resistant to some of that. So I think you do see some of that improvement in some areas where people are like, okay, hey, I've done this a few times. I know actually the thing we need to go solve is provide the right data, set up the right context, change how we work. Actually, that's a huge part of it, right? You're gonna have to change your own processes, just like as people, to do it as well. And so I think you see that, and I think that's great. But oftentimes you don't. As an aside, I think that also means that as a lot of AI companies, for a lot of you, especially if you want to go really broad and not just the early adopters, you do have to meet people where they are. You can't just assume that they're gonna know all this stuff and do this stuff on their own. You kind of have to meet them.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So Jason, you kind of touch on the following question I'm gonna ask you, but if we can go a little bit more in details. Now, um, so every company today that they want to implement like any other solution, but especially now with the AI, because there's a lot of hype. Let's be honest about it. There's a lot of hype, uh,
sure.
but there's a lot of good solutions also as well. So now, um, very few companies, in my opinion, and this is something again from previous experiences, not related necessarily to the AI, can actually measure, you know, the ROI of their solutions, right?
Yeah.
Right. So how is that applicable on measuring AI productivity? Um, is it like more difficult? Is it like something you can show? And the reason I'm asking you because there's a lot of talks currently, and I shared that on my socials also as well. The licensing model of
Yeah.
all software is changing based on outcomes, right? So no
Yeah.
more seat based.
Yep.
I mean, it's not going, but I mean, everyone
Good
is talking
question.
about,
Yeah.
yeah. So when it comes to AI productivity, like how do you measure it?
Yeah. I mean, I think I don't know which one you're asking, but I'm both on the buyer and the vendor side. So
Okay.
um, on
You can
on
answer on both.
I'll take a stab at both. I think so on the vendor side for us, because our primary product, our first product is this timekeeping product. The plus there is like we actually help people find more time. And so what happens with our customers is they end up billing for more time. They save time in prepping the bill. They have fewer compliance issues if their bill is getting rejected. And so that nicely is if you bill for time that is very tied to economic value, right? Like if you're bill for more time, you don't get rejected, blah blah blah. Our customers make more money, right? So it's honestly quite beautiful for us in terms of that ROI. Obviously, the pricing models, there's still a lot of work to be done. Is like who's going to do per seat, who does whatever, who does platform prices, who does result pricing. But at the very least for us, that there is that connection at the end of the day of like, if you use us, you will make more money than you pay us, and we'll all be happy, right? And so I think that is nice. And like you're saying, not everybody, not all businesses, not all products have that tie very clear. I think a great example of that is me on the buyer side, right? Like, we buy all kinds of AI tools. If you think about on the software development side specifically, we have everything from Anthropic to we use Codex, we use every potential coding agent that we might imagine. And I think that one is really fascinating. And I think maybe I'm just too old, but like I feel like a lot of this is actually just surfaces the same challenges that have always existed, but are just now, even more focused, right? Like software engineering productivity has always been very difficult to measure. Right? There's been there's a small vertical about trying to solve this. Everyone's trying to figure this out. No one's done a great job. And so I think that's going back to like being able to tie that to ROI. Like as a buyer, we use all these tools that should help us. And unfortunately, I don't think we still now have a great measurement is like, how much did it help us? I think it's been a lot of, the jobs of CTOs, of engineering leaders to like have a feel for that. And like everyone has their own system. But honestly, it's kind of a intuition, and people kind of have some system plus intuition on it. I guess plus is it's good for our jobs, the job security in the fuzziness of that measurement. But I think that's a continual challenge. I think is that I don't think like I don't know. I can tell you how much we spend on some of these things. I don't know if I can't tell you the dollar ROI of those things yet. And obviously we'd all love that. But I'm not sure that we're terribly close to that yet. And like I said, I don't think that's unique to AI. It's always been true. It's always been hard to measure because it's just like what you're measuring is so far out. But yeah.
Are we still in experimental phase, you would say, Jason?
Yes, I think very, very much so. Right. Like you dive into the software development stuff, right? Is like a year ago, we were all using Cursor, like IDE based like AI stuff. Now everyone's doing agentic code all the time. I was just talking to somebody. He was asked, actually, a CTO was considering taking a job, and he was like, "Does anyone actually write the code anymore?" I was like, "Nope, no one actually writes the code directly anymore. It's all through agents, etc." And so like that's only been the last 6-9 months or whatever that's been happening, right? And so I think everything is changing, and everyone's finding new challenge. Like one thing on my mind is like I think with everyone using agentic code, like we're creating code quickly. Everybody is right, but everyone's running into new bottlenecks, right? Like the code review, the quality side of it is like honestly hasn't been as well solved, and so we're all running into bottlenecks there. My personal hypothesis, I don't know what the solution is that a lot of our systems like PRs and code reviews, etc., don't make sense in this kernel. Like my maybe hot take is code reviews were never good. They were like always a terrible process, and they were super leaky. But they worked because you didn't generate that much code, and the people who wrote code like knew it well, and so that you could do a final check. They caught some stuff, but it was super leaky, honestly. But they caught some stuff. But it doesn't really work when most of the code is written by agents and like it's coming at a volume that's super high, and code reviews have too much of a responsibility for catching things, right? Like that they weren't really built for. So like I think to this experiment. Sorry, I'm going way tangent on your question, experimental point, but like it does feel like there's just a change in fundamentally how we work to solve that, right? And everyone's trying different things. We're trying different things, but like it does feel like there's a shift in that normal flow because just the math is so different now in terms of where the time is spent.
Great input, because you helped me in crafting better my next question. And sorry if it's gonna look like a loaded one.
No, please.
I don't. Yeah, but because these are very related to each other. So you mentioned about not writing code anymore. I think we've seen a lot of people talking about it. Anthropic CEO himself, like he talked about it. Now, I'm gonna ask you like two related questions here. I'm gonna like try to put them into one. how this affecting, the team structure from engineering team perspective,
Yeah.
and how that is also shaping leadership, technical leadership, right?
Yeah.
So, because everyone has access to, I believe, sort of a, again, quote unquote, co-pilot, or like
Yep.
whatever solution you're using. um how the measurement, how the management and the measurement of the performance of the engineers
Yeah. Yeah.
get sorted out now.
Yeah. No, it's really interesting. I might actually add one thing to that too.
Sure.
At the end, but like, yeah, no, I think it's really interesting. I was actually a very similar conversation recently too. Is like on how to measure performance of engineers. I think the funny thing is at the end of the day, we're gonna measure it in the same ways that we always have. We always had other like if you think about career ladders, et cetera, that you would build up to what it is. But at the end of the day, we are going to like what is the value that people are delivering to the company, right? Like that's actually what you do. Like we do a lot of architecture and code delivery, blah blah blah. But really, all of that, if you didn't deliver value to the company and doing that like that, that's not the performance we're looking for. And so I think in some ways, like because we don't have those easy, pieces as much anymore, there's a little bit we kind of step back. It's like, all right, is this team or this person delivering value? And that's both in terms of releasing new stuff, but also it works and like we're able to manage it going forward. And so I think there's that kind of stepping back and like analyzing that. As an aside, I actually think that's part of the reason why there's so much challenge with junior people versus more senior people. Like more senior engineers, you were always looking at a little bit of a longer scale, long time scale, like did you add value over time type of deal. And actually this kind of fits a little bit nicer because you're not like, you have a certain amount of trust of the code quality, et cetera, and you see the result of like those other issues over time. With more junior people, it's like, did you do this task? And now that task is kind of largely done by AI, and so like it's harder to be like, are you developing or not? On the management piece, I think one thing is just managers are more hands-on. I think a lot of managers were hands-on before, but it's definitely more of a requirement now, right? Because like it's just very possible to do it, and like it's almost a miss if you're not. And so I think there's just more people working with agents, writing code or doing tooling, and like you can that like hour of time as a manager to go do something on the side. Now you can actually go and do something when before it's really hard to jump into enough context and go do. It is one thing that I find really interesting though is so I think our management, like span of control, people who manage it probably has grown a bit just because it fits there. However, like I think there's a lot of talk about what the ratios are of like product people to engineers to designers, et cetera, or like what size pod you should have.
Hmm.
I'm not tied to this, but current information, like current experience that we're seeing is like I'm actually not sure we should do this like 2 engineers to 1 PM, like these really tiny pods that some people are trying to do. And part of it is like once again unrelated to AI stuff, right? Like if you're running software, you probably have some on-call schedule, right? If your on-call schedule is 2 people, like that's no good for anybody, right? You kind of need a certain group of people. The scope that let's call it 5% team or whatever 10% team is doing is obviously much larger than it was before. But I think there's still some organizational benefit of grouping a set of people together. And in some ways, it's actually kind of nice when you have big enough group with now a huge scope. You can really give them a key company goal and they can own the whole thing, right? Actually, that's really motivating and clear. It's like, okay, my job is to solve this. Like it doesn't, I have a really large remit to go do that. And in some ways, that's actually really clean. So, yeah.
I think one important point you just mentioned, Jason, and again, this is, I learned it by uh, curiosity, I would say, back
Mhm.
when I was working full time. So when people think about, the engineering team, they think only about the people who are coding,
Yeah.
designing, and of course there is the product managers and so on. But they forget that, you have to have, a group of, people, and I know like you usually do it in shifts,
Yeah.
where these engineers, they have to be on call in case
Yeah.
like a bug shows, like
Exactly.
something, and people, they think, oh, like now with AI we can shrink the engineering organization, we don't need a lot of people. Like, say, by the
Yeah.
way, it's same happening not only in engineering. I think it's happening in other departments as well,
Yeah.
which is, I think what you just mentioned is a wake up call. Like, okay, AI cannot solve all your problems like this
Yeah.
in one shot, right? So we need to get onto it now. What I want to ask you from engineering perspective, with AI now generating the codes, I never applied for to be honest with you, to a job, although like I used to like to code, 20
Yeah.
years ago, but I didn't have the chance to get. But what I was hearing, during interviews, and you go to the skills and you try to see like who got the best. Now with the AI, right? So
Yeah.
what kind of skills you as a leader you look for?
Yeah.
So these guys, like they can differentiate themselves, they can add value to the
Yeah.
organization.
First off, I will say I don't have a great answer there. I don't think anyone does. It's very hard for me to know.
That's fair enough.
Yeah, no, and it is actually what I was wanting to add to is like, yeah, no, it's very hard, right? And there are some similarities for sure, right? Like a lot of the system design, can you think clearly and talk clearly about something is still there, right? It's like, what I think we've seen time and time again is you need to have that clarity of thought so you can guide the agents to do the thing that you think is the right thing, right? So you still do need that, like, given a problem, here's what we need to go and do. It does raise the importance of the ability to read and understand code, right? That was always important, but like that's almost
Right.
more important now, right? I was just kind of describing it almost like with agent code, it's almost like there's like everyone's jumping into legacy code bases all the time, right? Because it's like a ton of code that there's not somebody there who wrote it that you're trying to figure it out. You kind of like always like doing archaeology to figure it out, and so you have to really be able to understand that and figure that out. And so like I think there's actually a lot of those core skills that are super relevant. Funny tangent. So I have 4 young kids, and so like one of the things I'm thinking about, like what should what skills should my kids be learning in this future that I don't even know what it's going to be. And I think this is related to interviewing is like, you know what? I actually still want them to learn how to code the same way like we learned arithmetic growing up. Like I
Yep.
don't have to do arithmetic, but doing arithmetic is good for building intuition for how things work and figuring out how to apply math. And I think of it similar here is like understanding software deeply gives you intuition, even if you're not going to write about like how it should be done or where there might be problems or how to think about things. And I think that applies to interviewing too, is like, okay, hey, how do you test and find and understand those key things so that they have the right intuition? Because yes, anybody can write the prompt, we go build me an app that does X, right? But like, do you have the right intuition about software to be like, okay, hey, if you're building this kind of app, you're worried about this kind of skill problem, or you're worried about these kinds of ways it might break down. And like that's the intuition we're looking for, because that's that almost translation gap of like, what is our company problem to what is the technical thing the agent might build? Like that's what that person at the keyboard needs to do. And so that's really that understanding. I'm not sure that we as us, this company or the industry, have figured out like the system to go apply to go do that, but we're at least trying to lean on some of the things we have and then do some amount of like, hey, as part of the interview, you can use AI to do parts of the interview, and that's great. That's the expectation. But let's figure out how to like pull apart your contribution to that versus what
Mhm.
you did as well. So
Right. I agree with you on keep teaching, the next generation about coding, just for the simple reason. It's not like about maybe, yeah, they will not have to write a single line of code in the future. Actually,
yeah,
you don't have to even today. We
yeah,
know this, if you want. But I think, for me, always what the reason I used to like, and still I like, to play sometimes with coding, is the logic, right? So
yeah,
so it taught me, how to think in logic, and then how do you structure things. It's more than just, the the program itself, or the code itself, how it
yeah,
works. It's like about how I can structure things.
yeah,
And I hope someone does this experiment, and we try, for example, especially with these vibe coding
yeah,
tools, if we try to get someone who have like little bit of coding background to type a prompt, and then fix the
yeah,
output, versus someone non-technical. And I'm not saying this because non-technical people cannot do it, they can. And of course they might have like, they might describe it from business perspective better than a
yeah,
technical person. But still, if you want to get a better result, I tried, I cannot claim it's an experiment, but I tried, to write the prompt
yeah,
in different ways. More One more like as a kind
yeah,
of a technical guy, the other one more a business guy. Of course, I saw the difference, right? And then when you try to fix things later, it makes the life much easy.
yeah,
Now, the reason I'm asking, and I brought this here, you kind of touch on it, but now, how big is the AI hallucination, noise? Of course, we just mentioned, and you just mentioned, Jason. It's about, the we know these AI tools. They are chatty. They like to talk. I call them. They are
yeah,
talkative.
Yeah.
We can see from ChatGPT and the other tools, you ask for something, they throw in front of you
Yeah.
hundreds of nonsense things sometimes.
Yep.
Now, if we take this into code perspective, how much of that is noise? How much of that is technical depth, which is very dangerous? Because I remember when I started the podcast, I didn't know even what the technical depth is at that time. I mean, from you know
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
structuring your thing. So, and then I start to understand from people I was interviewing. Oh my god! Like if actually, and this is still, by the way, AI generated code wasn't that much in 2023. It was like still early days. And then I start to think, oh my god! Like now, if we are building these whole modules
Yeah.
using AI, how much risk is there, Jason, still? And do you
Yeah.
think like we will be able to solve the problem that is caused by AI generated code?
Yeah. Yeah. On the last question, I think yes. I'm a very human optimist. Is that
Good.
we create
Good,
a
Jason.
problem and we'll solve our problems. Like we're going to create some big problems, but we'll solve them. So that I think we will solve them. Maybe some challenges, but yes, I think for sure there's a technical debt issue that exists and that keeps growing with this. And I think there's actually like an interesting spectrum, right? There's the hey, you create some prompt, like you said, like especially if you're either naive on the technical side or not being very diligent about it, you can just like, be explosive, right? And like there can be versions of this where you like, and anybody with some technical skill can glance at it and be like, that's crazy. And so hopefully you have things to stop that, right? And hopefully some systems be like, okay, hey, yeah, we should redo this. We should have the right system prompts or whatever to manage it, and we should check it, blah blah blah. But actually, I think the more insidious ones are these smaller ones, right? The ones that are like, hey, that's okay. It's not how I would have done it, but it's okay. And so then I think the challenge is that probably happens a lot, right? Because then everyone's like, okay, either I could iterate a few more times to get the prompt and the code exactly how I want, or I could not and get it out and go into the next thing. And because everyone's generating so much code, you actually do that a lot, and the whole team does it a lot, right? And so I do think you end up having this maybe drift from the quality you might otherwise require. And I think that definitely creates this like tech that challenge. And the other part too is also the expertise challenge, right? Is like when you were as an engineer writing the code yourself, you just like deeply understood it because you're hands-on keyboard typing it through it, and see it just creates a certain depth of understanding. When you're doing it with agents, yeah, you're in it, but you're never quite in it quite as much, and so you don't quite understand it quite as well. And so not only do you have this code that may not be exactly the highest quality that you would wanted, but also you don't know it as deeply as you used to. So when something comes up, you don't have the perfect intuition about how it works. And so yeah, I do think there's a bunch of challenges. One thing I'm very curious about is with AI, in theory, you should be able to do big rewrites more often, right? If that makes sense, right?
Mhm.
Like general rule in software engineering is like don't do big rewrites. It's a terrible idea. You're gonna spend a lot of time and it's gonna be really awful, right? Um, but I think there's a world where now, when code generation is much cheaper, is it actually much more possible to be like, hey, this thing sort of works, but we need to re-architect it. We should throw away and build it again. And I think that is actually one of the things I'm interested to explore to solve this tech debt issue. Is like, hey, it's going to happen. It's pretty much unstoppable to grow right now. But do we willing to take the step to like, okay, hey, cool, we learned what we need to do with the product. Let's redo it this way. And not only can we do that relatively quickly because we need agents to help us, but two, we can actually build the test harnesses and the other things to make sure it works. So this rewrite is a lot less scary. And so like actually like internally we've talked about, hey, for sometimes we have a tech review, if I could actually review some idea. Normally you do all the like whiteboarding and boxes of like what you're gonna do. Sometimes we're like, you should build a prototype of a thing that kind of works because like that's much cheaper. You can do that even before we have a group meeting about it. And if we decide we're not going to do it and rebuild it, that's not a big deal either. And so like I wonder if that's like a mentality shift of like, hey, actually, if we treat the code as much more throwaway, and we're build the code around it to be able to replace it more comfortably, is that the path to solve this tech debt issue of like, hey, we're just willing, it's going to happen and it always has happened, but it's happening faster, but we're just willing to go and like, yeah, we're going to go and fix it now because we have this context and we can, craft the right way to think about it going forward. And use the tools. I think that's actually the big thing. You have to be able to use AI tools to address the problems that AI is creating, because like we just won't have the bandwidth otherwise. And so it's like, okay, hey, how do we go find that opportunity?
Right. I gotta ask like something which I didn't plan to ask, but because the conversation brought us here.
Yeah.
Um, Is there any difference, Jason? I'm asking you from pure technical perspective, using the AI code generators, directly from, let's say, Anthropic, like, Cloud Code, or Codex in case of, OpenAI, or I forget what the Google one. It's Gemini. It's one of the
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Gemini.
yeah, yeah,
And I saw like now XAI, they have something also as well, versus the wrappers, right? So
yeah,
there's a lot of, they just wrap it, like similar where you see any
yep.
AI application. Is- Are there really any, differences? Because I'm asking you this from an experience that recently I had, is sometimes I believe when you use directly the model provider, you get more solid results rather than when, but when you go on the design side, of course the others, they're better. And
Yeah,
this podcast is not sponsored by anyone, so any name I mention, there's
yeah,
no affiliation. So let's say if you go to Lovable, Replit,
yeah,
these
yeah,
kinds of things, the design is awesome. If you go to Anthropic, if you go to Cloud Code, or the codex from OpenAI, I'm sure it's not. I'm sure. I am sure because I tried few things, and from functionality perspective, I can feel it's more robust than using
yep.
a third party tool. Anything experience you can share here, like, or any lights you can shed?
Yeah, I mean, I think like is the fundamental question of like the differences between the direct from the model providers and other tools. I mean, like I think the funny thing is a lot of this is a black box. It's like it's hard to tell. I think there's always, if you like look at forums, there's whispers. It's like, hey, did they nerf the 5.2 model and code whatever? Like there's all these questions all the time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And we honestly we don't know. Like we're on the outside, we don't really know. Um, I do think I think the biggest thing is this answer is always constantly changing. Like this space is changing so fast, and so like the right model provider to choose, the right tooling to choose, et cetera, kind of changes all the time. And like I do think it's pretty clear that it's an interesting combination where I think some wrappers are nice because they help. I think part of it is like these wrappers are helpful because they might solve a part of the problem that makes certain things easier, right? Like for example, making a really simple, nice looking site probably easier than these lovables, bolts, whatever's of the world. That's true. If you're gonna go build a full-fledged app, you're probably still gonna go lean back on Claude Code or Codex or whatever, and that'll make the most sense. But there is some real value in that stuff. Like for example, we also use Devin, which is like a thing about cognition that, as far as I can tell, I think it's probably a wrapper on one of these models. But they did some niceties of like, oh, they hook up to all these other systems easily, like linear, and they run the agent in the cloud for you, et cetera. It's like we could do all of that, but it's nice that they did it for us, right? And that's the same thing with these wrappers. Is like, hey, if you're technical enough, you can set up something in Superbase and Amplify, whatever, to go stand up a website. But if you're not, or you don't want to bother, like there's value in that. And so I think there's something there. Obviously that doesn't apply for everybody, right? Like if you're a software company, like there's a lot of stuff you should just do in house because it's so core to what you do. But like it's right now, if, at least to me, it seems like with those wrappers, it's like the ecosystem and the value of the ecosystem they're building around it is the real value. And then as the buyer of it, you have to decide like, do you actually care about the ecosystem or not? And you don't necessarily care about it all, but like I think that to me is the question. And I think the really tricky part too is like it just changes so quickly. It's a funny
Right.
thing with all these AI tools is like it does feel like you just have to avoid any long-term contracts because like they all change so fast, and so like you have to be ready to be like, oh, how we want to build software is actually completely different now. We have to be ready to move there if need be. So
Yeah, and to your point, we're dealing with black boxes,
yeah,
and it's their nature, by the way, because
yeah,
at the end of the day, the way they, I don't want to go into that now, but I mean just on a high level, so for the audience to understand. So the way any LLM tools try, they do guesses on what's the
exactly.
next token is, and there's a lot of, if you like math and you like probability theories, like you you
Yeah,
might be able to understand that. But yeah, so I tried a couple of times to the same model, same version, to put the same question, and I get slightly different answers
yeah,
sometimes. And I believe when you are doing the coding, you never know, right?
yeah,
So
yeah. I
yeah,
think
so
that's the
so
fascinating thing about this whole new space is like in software, we've been so used to it being super logical. I've always told people software is actually really easy, right? Because 1 + 1 always equals 2. You have to build this
exactly.
complex system, but always some smart human came up with it. So you can kind of guess and how it works because like just like logically consistent.
Yeah,
Right? Now with LLMs, like that's not true. Like it's all stochastic. It's kind of random. Like, and so like when you build a product, it doesn't always work, but maybe it's actually a great product. It just only works 99.9% of the time. You just have to accept that 0.1% it's wrong. But then also like when we use these tools to go build it, it's very interesting because we're using these stochastic tools, these agent builders to go build deterministic software. And it's an interesting like, and then of course the problems we're working on are different every time. So it's like very hard to get a good sense for like the performance of different models and different tools for sure, but also just like it's a changing of how we think, right? Of
absolutely,
like,
absolutely.
what's the bug versus what is, just part of the cost of doing business. So
Again, no affiliation, but I have to give credit to Anthropic on the cloud code part,
right. Yep.
because one of the things, and of course this is because of the memory. I always like the part of my instructions, like anything you give me, explain your rationale, right? Like
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
explain how you come to it. Because I tried that with the others. Don't get me wrong, but the best explanation I get is from Anthropic. The super product. Like even
Yeah.
if you try as hobbyists like myself, I would recommend it. Just as we are always coming to an end, like final thoughts maybe, and where people can get in touch.
Oh yeah. I get in touch. I think LinkedIn is probably the easiest for me. Name is Jason Lee. The final thoughts. I don't know. I guess the biggest thing is like we're kind of touching on. There's still like so much unknowns. Like there's most of what I've said is like my best hypothesis, but who knows? And like, but that's also actually the fun of it, right? Like, actually, the way I mentioned at the beginning, like I've worked in B2B software for a while. It's great, it's challenging, etc. But it also become pretty well defined. Like you go do these things, and like this is what you go and do as a playbook to do this. A lot of AI is really thrown up, I'm sure, for many different people. It's like kind of thrown up a lot of the things that you should do up in the air, and so that's actually quite fun, though, right? You kind of rediscovering like what is the right answer, how do you go think about this, and what do you do, what lessons apply from years ago and what needs to be with
Mhm.
completely rethought. And I think that's just like really interesting, right? And I assume you're seeing a lot of that as conversations and stuff, but like it's just a really interesting time where a lot of things are changing. Not everything will change, but a lot of things will change. And trying to understanding what changes and what they change to and what doesn't change is it's just quite fun. Yeah, it's good. So
Opportunities also for startups, right? I believe.
100%, 100%, tons of opportunities for startups, so individuals to for everything. And yeah, there's just like tons of yeah. With a rapid change, I feel like there's always an opportunity both for individual and companies to go and seize on something.
Yeah, like just as a follow up on this, like I get surprised, especially in the past. I would say 6 to 9 months because of the guests, of course, and
Yeah,
people they when they show interest to be here. Okay, wow, like see how much AI, like it created new categories, or like the same, maybe not a category yet, but I mean problems that
yeah,
actually it's using AI to solve another AI problem. So
yeah,
there's a lot of opportunities. Plus, I believe there's a lot of areas we didn't touch still yet to solve it with AI. I mean, in the real life, and yeah, so it's great to be in such times.
yeah,
Jason, really, I enjoyed. Of course, like I gotta put your LinkedIn profile in the show notes. Of course, Laurel website will be available there. And thank you for the time today. I really enjoyed the discussion. We are in exciting times. This is my takeaway, and there's a lot of things still to uncover, especially when it comes to AI, especially when we talk about ROI and showing the value. And of course, one of the main topics we discussed today is about like how engineering team structures are changing and the role of the leadership in this. So thank you again, Jason. As I said, the links will be available in the show notes. If you're listening on your favorite podcasting app, if you're watching this on YouTube, you'll find them in the description. And this is how I end my episode. This is for the audience. As I say always, if you just discovered this podcast by like, thank you for passing by. I hope you enjoyed. If you did so, give me a favor and try to, subscribe, share it with as much people as you can, because you're trying to, spread the knowledge and spread, all the good and nice stuff. Like Jason brought to us a lot of great topics today. So just share that. And if you are one of the people who keeps coming again and again, thank you very much for your support. Thank you very much for keep following. And the big thank you for everyone who still mention us, tell other people about us. This is huge for me because of this. For the first time, and we are recording in the end of May. So in May, the podcast managed to get first time ever in North America, in Canada. We were in the top 200 podcast chart. This is big for me. Like we were always in Europe somewhere, in Asia, in the Middle East where I'm based. So we managed to get into North America finally, and this is cannot happen by itself. So this is again, thank you for everyone who is listening and tuning in. And as I say always, we will be again in new episode very soon. Thank you. Bye bye.